Okay, guys, just a supplemental thing to kind of go along with what we've been talking about. Uh, Basically talking about the molecules of life and organic chem. This is kind of an intro, supplemental intro. When you see the word carbohydrate, what comes to mind? When you look at that word and break that word down? You might want to take out a piece of paper, pen, if you want to pause this for a minute and just kind of be ready to copy some notes down. Carbohydrate, combination of several terms. So what does that mean exactly, carbohydrate? And when you look at carbohydrates, look at what they're made of and their structure, you'll see that they're made of carbons, they're made of hydrogen, and they're made of oxygen in different forms. So there's fructose, galactose, different kinds of carbohydrates. Monosaccharide refers to the term mono meaning one and saccharide meaning sugar or a single sugar. That falls under the heading of carbohydrates. Those are simple sugars. Simple sugars are typically sweet to the taste. When you touch them to your tongue, they have a sweet, like maple syrup. The things that, if you watch the movie Elf, and he talks about all the food groups, really the only food groups he's talking about are simple sugars when you watch that movie. But things that are sweet to the taste are simple sugars. This is a molecule of cellulose, which is the structure that plants make, or this is glucose, but this is what plants make when they get access to the sun's energy. They make this. Now if you look closely and break down that bond, it's 6 carbons, 12 hydrogens, and 6 oxygens make up a single molecule of glucose. So mono means one saccharide. So what would disaccharide mean? That means 2. And polysaccharide is a complex carbohydrate, meaning lots of saccharides that are bonded together. So I would write that down. Mono meaning a monomer of a sugar. That means a single piece. Monomer means a single piece. Disaccharide, that's 2 of them bonded together, like table sugar. And then polysaccharide, like what you'd find in a potato or tree bark. That's a complex carbohydrate. Okay. So complex carbohydrates are going to be those things that we eat that are very filling, breads, pastas, rice, starches. Those are complex carbohydrates, lots of saccharides bonded together. Okay, the next thing I want you to write down, we're away from carbohydrates and saccharides, sugars for a bit. Now we're going to shift our focus to proteins. Okay, and under that heading, you'll write down a couple of terms, sort of like sub-headings. You write down the word protein. You'll also write down amino acid and enzymes. Amino acids are a monomer of a protein, a piece of a protein. When amino acids get bonded together, they form something, here it looks a little bit like a pearl necklace, but it's what's called a polypeptide chain. Amino acid, peptide bond, amino acid, peptide bond. This is what happens in the cells in your body when they're making structures. Okay? So they use amino acids to kind of link together to make a protein. So a monomer of a protein is an amino acid. Enzymes are also proteins in your body, fall under that heading. We're going to do a lab. We'll actually just do it on camera called the chicken liver lab, where I demonstrate that enzymes in your body can just be reused over and over and over again. And they never get used up. And if enzymes in your body stop functioning, it's due to something's altered the shape of them, and made them denatured. Yeah. In the lab that we do, just to describe briefly, because we have a second here, we'll take chicken liver, which is full of an enzyme called catalase, and we'll dump hydrogen peroxide on that chicken liver, and it will do the same thing hydrogen peroxide does with you, because you've got catalase in your body. So if you dump hydrogen peroxide on a cut, it bubbles. If you dump more hydrogen peroxide on a cut, it will bubble again, and that's oxygen being released from the hydrogen peroxide molecule. So what you're left with is water and then the bubbles, the oxygen bubbles. And that can happen over and over again. Catalase never gets used up unless you do something to that catalase enzyme that changes its shape. And we'll demonstrate that you can actually make it stop bubbling by denaturing that enzyme. Okay, lipids, another one. Okay, fatty acids, steroids, these all fall under the heading of lipids, cholesterol as well. So a monomer of a lipid would be a fatty acid chain. Okay? Every cell in your body is held together by what's called a lipid bilayer. And a demonstration, kind of a picture of that. You see this lipid bilayer. This is a little bit kind of a not so 3D version of the sac that sort of holds in all the cells in your body. And this is that lipid bilayer surrounds every cell in your body. Okay. You'll also find lipids in the foods that we eat. Beeswax is an example of a lipid. Earwax, mucus, those are all examples of lipids. And again, the lipid bilayer that surrounds all the cells in your body. Those little purple dots that you see there, those are phosphorus. And then the little things under those purple dots, those are fatty acid chains. So your body absolutely has to have some lipids to make the cells that it makes. Okay, so quick question. Is this a protein? Is this a lipid? Or is this a carbohydrate? Okay, see if you can guess. This is a carb, a lipid, or a protein. What do you see here? Okay. All right, so most of what makes up that fungus growing on that tree trunk there is a complex carbohydrate. And the tree bark itself is a carbohydrate. Although you do get protein from eating mushrooms as well. Okay, what's all this stuff? Is this a carb, a lipid, or a protein? Anything waterproof, or things that we use for waterproofing, those are lipids. Okay, lipids have a good waterproofing agent, which is why ancient Eskimos up in Alaska used them to waterproof their kayaks. They used seal blubber to waterproof their kayaks. What about a Subway sandwich? Carb, lipid, or protein? Okay. The answer would be all. So when you first show up at Subway and walk down the counter, they ask you which bread that you want. They should say, which complex carbohydrate do you want? And then they ask you, do you want cheese, which is mostly a lipid, and protein. And then they ask you, what meat do you want? Well, that's a protein. And then they ask you about your veggies. Those are carbohydrates. And then they ask you, do you want oil or vinegar? What they should say is, do you want a lipid, okay, or a carbohydrate? Vinegar being a carbohydrate, and the oil being a lipid, an unsaturated fat. Got to have all of them to grow. What is the cartilage in your nose? That's a protein. Okay. They all have one thing in common. This is nicknamed God's glue, a carbon atom. It's the organic molecule, and if you look, you can see why. It's got an electron on, evenly spaced on those outer valence shells, and that helps it bond to different things like hydrogen and form organic compounds, organic molecules. So there we go. Thank you. We'll go back to it and we'll learn a little bit more as we go.